Boy, that's a beautiful moon and looks great in binoculars. And hey, everybody, so glad you're with me, Stargazer Mark, to stay star curious on Stay Curious here at the American Space Museum. We're so glad you're with us every Monday. We do a program on amateur astronomy gauged at backyard astronomy. And if you've been in your backyard the last couple of days, you know that the moon is crescent, making its moon dance across our sky and illuminating more of itself along that line of light and day called the Terminator. Look at this beautiful picture of the moon a little bit after first quarter, which is going to be this Thursday's first quarter. But this is a beautiful picture by our friend Dave Vranick. Hello, Dave Vranick in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And what is so cool about this picture of Dave's is he took it through some different filters, and you see the very slight differences in colorization. Those are minerals on the moon. Oh boy, that's so cool to look at the moon. And like I said, it's the only kind of moonshine that you can't get too much of. So we're going to talk about getting in your backyard this week and just looking at the moon with the binoculars. You can look at some stars with your star chart in your red flashlight, but the good thing about the moon is you don't have to dilate your pupils to see the objects on it like you do the faint fuzzy galaxies and nebula that I talk about all the time. Because when the moon's out, it washes out the delicate, if you will, deep sky objects that amateur astronomers love to find and photograph. So you don't need a red flashlight to look at the moon, but what is advised is you get you a good moon map. And here's a moon map that is a very good one. It's in 4 quadrants, and it folds up. Bought this one on Sky and Telescope. You've got information here of features that if you want to find the features, you look them up there. But field map of the moon, undeniable resource in your stargazing kit. This one particularly is oriented towards the moon being flipped around. We did a couple moon gazes, we being the Brevard Astronomical Society here on the Space Coast this weekend, and I was in charge of one of them. We had the Valiant Air Command Warbird Museum here. And people noticed looking through a telescope at the crescent moon over the weekend, they go, well, why is it upside down and left to right? That's a good question, because in optics, binoculars, they put extra lenses in there to flip things around so that they stay terrestrial view with what is traditionally north and south is at the top and bottom. But when in stargazing, there is no north or south really. And to pass light through another filter to correct that and invert the image the way you see it with your eye degrades light a little bit. Every time light passes through a surface, it loses a little bit of its intensity as well as its sharpness. So we don't flip things around to terrestrial view, we call it, unless you just have to, unless you want to. So a lot of pictures are south is at the top. Now, Dave Vranick's beautiful picture here, he does have south at the bottom. I'm pointing to a cool crater called, let me point to that. That is Tycho, named after the great astronomer Tycho. You see the rays coming off of it? And this one up here is Copernicus, a very famous astronomer and famous crater on the moon. And way over there to the right, see that oval? That's Mare Crisium. You always want to look to see Mare Crisiums on the edge of the moon somewhere. You'll be surprised at the movies and advertising that has the moon upside down or inverted. They'll even show the backside of the moon sometimes. But usually a lot of movies are correct about that. And you look for the Sea of Crisis up there in the upper right. Other seas, right here, my finger's pointing to Mare Tranquility. Got to get that worked out, Marty. How do I do that? I go like that. There's Mare Tranquility. That is and about right there's where the Apollo 11 astronauts landed. Okay, up here's where Apollo 16 landed. All right, over here's where Apollo 15 landed. Apollo 12 over here. The moon is a real place that's even going to become more real to us as the Artemis moon program lands on the moon and we become more familiar with features. Unfortunately, it's been almost 50 years since Apollo 16 landed on the moon in April 1972. And then Apollo 17, the last lunar mission, landed in right over here in this area in December 1972. Why can't I get that down, Marty? There we go. Yeah, I'm pointing behind me there. So we lost focus on the familiar places of the moon with names and so forth, but there's thousands of names of famous people on the moon. And so all this program today is a little bit of lunacy to inspire you to go out and maybe write a poem about the moon, maybe write a short story about it, take pictures of it with your telephoto lens. Maybe you know how to do it through a telescope. That's pretty easy. Or make your own sketches of the moon. But more importantly, take a moon map out there with you. Sit in a chair that's comfortable to look at the moon through your telescope or binoculars and begin to learn the names of the human beings who are immortalized on the moon. And we're going to see a few of those here in a minute. Here is the rest of these photographs I took. All right. And that's where I want to be, Marty. That's the first quarter moon, which is our half of it is illuminated. Don't know why they don't call it first half moon, because then they call it full moon. But 1/4 of the moon's 3/4 sides is illuminated here. But actually, the back side of the moon is illuminated. We just can't see it. Here's a moon globe I have. It's so old that it doesn't even have the back side of the moon features on it. But I do have one thing going for me. I've got astronaut Charlie Duke's signature on this moon globe that I got. I got this moon globe in the 1960s, about 1969, speaking at a Rotary Club. Here's the Earth, and though this is a little bit bigger, in scale, the moon is about 1/4 the size of the Earth. It does not even cover the entire United States. It's 2,160 miles across. But as we go to our moon gazing this weekend, as the moon is going from first quarter on Thursday to full moon the following Friday, along the Terminator is where you see the best detail there. Not an Arnold Schwarzenegger thing. The Terminator is the difference between night and day. And just like on Earth, we enjoy the morning and the evening hours because there's a lot of shadows being cast. And those shadows are appeasing to our human eyesight that is processing things. In the middle of the day, everything looks dull because the sunlight's directly overhead, no shadows. And we kind of get bored with the outside and maybe start yawning a little bit and so forth. So I don't yawn. I'm going to have a little more rocket fuel here. Pretty good stuff today, Marty. But here is the first quarter moon. And when you photograph the moon with your own camera, make sure that you have density in the lunar surface itself. In other words, don't make it look just like a bright flashlight. You've got to see the Maria, the frozen lava seas of the moon. That obviously most of them are oval, and that tells you that they were formed by impacts of asteroids in the early days of the moon's 4.5 billion year old history. You might see the moon this week as you're looking out at in your own backyard, and it has a ring around it, all right? A beautiful moon ring around it is always the same distance from the moon to the ring is always 22.5 degrees. Why is that? Because these rings around the moon and the sun are caused by certain crystals of ice in our atmosphere, way up high. They're always there, okay? 50,000 feet in the air where it's so cold, where airliners are. It's very cold up there, below zero. These ice crystals are a rectangle with a certain beveled edges on them. And these crystals reflect a certain kind of the light in a certain way and create a circle around the moon. So always beware of that. It might last just an hour or so, so have your camera handy to go out and grab the shot. Dave Vranick's shot of the moon there, he's from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and an excellent astrophotographer. And like I said, in Dave's picture here, look at the top where it's kind of coppery. And then over in other parts of it, it's kind of bluish. These are actually signature visual images of minerals on the moon. And again, we've got the north to the top and the south to the bottom. I've got Marty Winkle, my cameraman, co-producer, and he's working our Streamlabs computer program to bring you our show in a beautiful way. Marty worked on going to the moon with the lunar module. And Marty, can you believe that they're going down at the bottom of the moon there, below that raid crater Tycho, way down here, below my picture here, or as I put this up there, that is the south pole of the moon. And on one of those craters is called Shackelford. And though its rim gets sunlight, the bottom of it, about a mile deep, doesn't. And at that bottom, underneath the lunar soil called regolith, is ice, frozen ice. How do we know that? Well, we had a couple lunar orbiters like Lunar Prospector and that were sent to the moon to look for this hidden water frozen under the surface of the moon. Where'd it come from? Comets. Comets have seeded probably the solar system with water and maybe even life. So a few comets, millions of comets, have crashed into the moon during its early infancy. All right, we go to, now we're going to look at the moon a little bit up close like you would through binoculars or a small telescope. You don't need a very powerful telescope to see the craters on the moon like this. This is an 8-inch telescope that I use to photograph the moon. Look at the beautiful detail along that Terminator between night and day. And we're going to identify some of these features because as you look, what's so exciting about the moon to me is you go out and say it's dark at 8 o'clock. And by the way, daylight savings time is going to eat into that on March 13th is when daylight savings time goes into effect. So you all that love to play golf or tennis or garden, you'll have an hour more daylight. Us astronomers have to sit around and wait another hour to have our fun. But if you start looking at 8 o'clock and leave your telescope outside, you go back at 10 o'clock, you're going to see other areas of the moon that are revealed as the Terminator marches across the lunar surface, just like our Terminator on Earth does every day that creates our 24-hour day. The Terminator on the Earth is what we call evening twilight or morning twilight, all right? So think about that. If you could look up ahead as it's starting to get dark, you would see the Earth. You're right above the area of night and day. Well, I've labeled some of these areas on here. And we did a program about one of the gentlemen that named a lot of the features on the moon, Modeler, and there's a guy named Beer that sketched the moon for the first time, and several people just put arbitrary names on there, and they stuck. And they named it after a lot of famous philosophers and scientists and so forth, because the moon names came about in the 1700s. So you've got the Marsh of Decay, which is called Mare Putrid, okay. The Latin names are what they use. The Sea of Vapors is Mare Vaporium, okay. Love the Sea of Vapors. And of course you got the Central Bay there is Mare Meridium. Mare means lake in Latin, or sea. I've got labeled there, Manilus is 25-mile diameter crater there in the Sea of Vapors. And these mountains are called the Apennine Mountains, just like on Earth. And Marty, they're 15,000 feet tall, which is a little under 3 miles high. Pretty stout, high mountains for just a 2,000-mile diameter globe. A lot of the mountains of the moon were not created by tectonic plates like on Earth. There is no such thing on the moon. They were created by these lava seas being created with the impacts of asteroids and being pushed together, all right, as the whole moon's contour was changed. Here's another area of the moon that up at the top, look at the detail here. And as I'm drawing your brain into the detail, like I said, 2 hours later, you're going to see some of these mountain peaks over here. Like look at, I've got the 1 mile high Mount Piton, all right, is frozen in the lava east shore of Mare Imbrium. Mare Imbrium is the Sea of Rainbows. Okay, I mean, Sea of Rain. Imbrium is rain. Sea of Rain. There is an alpine valley up at the top, 100 miles long, that cuts through the lunar Alps. So they named the lunar features after features on Earth. At the time they were naming these features, some people even thought that the seas were actual oceans of water that were reflecting back the Earth's Earth light. Archimedes is a famous historical scientist. They're a 50-mile crater. A lot of the biggest craters are around 50 miles. All right. The largest crater on the moon is a little over 80 miles, except counting these gigantic impact basins. There I see in the middle, Apollo 15 landed right there in Mount Hadley in those mountains there. Bet you didn't know that, looking at this picture right there, that you're looking at the landing site of Apollo 15. That's why it's good to have a lunar map with you when you're enjoying a little bit of moon gazing, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow. They had to make a map of that and a detailed orbiter map to know where they were going to land. And to me, it just looks like the middle of a mountain. But quite a view they had at the Apollo 15 there. Let's look at one other area of the moon there that's quite cratered, with a lot of craters. You see those big craters there. Let me go back here a second. Let me go back to this one again. That Mount Piton. Imagine this. This was a mountain peak, all right, that when this lava flowed on the moon, it buried most of that mountain except the very top of it up there. And see those little peaks of sunlight catching the dawn on the left side there in the dark? You go back 2 hours later and you'll see more of those mountain peaks being revealed. That's what I love about lunar photography there. So here's a little cool area of the moon that's well known, with 3 gigantic craters in a row there. And those craters are Ptolemaeus, Alphonsus, and Arzachel. And Alphonsus is a famous crater because Ranger 9 crashed into Alphonsus, a kamikaze airplane, a kamikaze unmanned probe that was launched from Launch Pad 36. That we have a recreation here in our museum. So Alphonsus, they actually thought that central peak of Alphonsus may be a volcano peak. We didn't know. That was one reason why we sent Ranger there to take photos of it. Ptolemaeus is actually a pretty large crater at 90 miles across. You see a couple craters in the bottom. And as you get more powerful telescopes, you'd see more craters or more features on that on the bottom. But I want to talk about making the moon your own. After all, I keep emphasizing in astronomy, no one owns the original. No one owns the moon. You can do whatever you want with it. No one owns the Orion Nebula that is prominent right now. You can see the Orion Nebula in the 3 stars of the belt of Orion, and then his sword dangles down, and the middle star in the sword is a nebula of creating thousands of stars that is so vast that from the sun to one of the it would engulf the nearest star to us almost, probably. Sirius is 8 light years away. So this is a sketch I made that I enjoy a lot of old school astronomy. I enjoy looking at the shadows of these mountains as they are get shorter as the sun climbs above there. These shadows that I have on these mountains would only last like that for a couple hours, and then they would be completely different. And I'm going to refer to my actual sketch that I made here, Marty, of this. You don't need to move it. There's my actual sketch that I made with notes. You got to get a little bit organized to do this. I used a 9mm lens, an 8-inch telescope, and some data about where I took it. This happened to be at Bays Mountain Park, where in Tennessee, in Kingsport, where my astronomy club met. And to inspire you again, another sketch of Plato. Now, Plato's not visible. Let me show you where Plato is. Plato Plateau is, well, it's hard to see there, Marty, on this Dave Vranick picture. No, it is actually up at the very top. Right here is Plato. Yep. Go straight up. Straight a little more to the left. See that black oval? Yep, that black. Right, you're just above it. No, that's Mare Imbrium. All right, now go up higher, right at the edge. There you go. That is Plato, named after the great philosopher. This is one of the darker lava areas of the moon, and here I have sketched it. Okay, as I show it there, and I sketched it with an 8-inch telescope. I only used about, and power is such a misnomer in astronomy. I used a 12 millimeter lens, which is about 200 power to most. Clear after a stormy day, boiling somewhat. Mountain shadow on Plato's floor was exquisite. Pico and other peaks in Mare Imbrium had black, sharp shadows. In the floor, the shadow peak was so crisp it was eerie how it came to a point. I love and I did this sketch 20 years ago, all right? And that's what's fun about not being old, but about being in astronomy a long time, is that you can look back at some of your field notes and remember who you were with, what you were doing, and having fun. Now, I sketched some of this at the telescope, and then I went inside and finished them. And here's one that was quite complex in 1989. At 9 o'clock at night, an 8-inch telescope. The moon was just 3 days old, which is like it was a couple nights ago. 15 degrees out, all right. 90 power, not much magnification there, just to emphasize. And then you see my little sketches on the bottom in the circles to point out where on the moon it was. And I do these for myself, okay? Under no illusions that they're great works of art. This is the Rieta Valley, by the way, the longest valley on the moon. It was maybe created by a chain of craters going in there. But it's for me to gratify my love of astronomy and celebrate what I'm looking at. And sure, I have them in a little album, and maybe my daughter and granddaughter will someday look at them and say, "Look at what that old guy did, man. He sure had a lot of time on his hands." But actually, it's a lot of fun, and I encourage you all to do that. Now, we're going to the bottom of the moon again, Marty, and point that arrow down at the very bottom, okay, is a crater called Shackelford. Yep, and this is the southern hemisphere of the moon. The bottom of it is a lot, and you keep going, and that's a crater, those craters right in there that don't look like craters because we're just seeing the rims of them. Those craters, the bottom of them, don't get sunlight. So any cometary ice water that was brought there is still frozen, and that's where we're landing Artemis. All right, now Marty Winkle, I've told you, has worked with the Grumman lunar modules in the 60s, and part of where we landed along the equator was to conserve fuel. So this Artemis mission is going to have some big fuel tanks to go or orbit. They'll probably orbit north and south. That's what they'll do instead of going around the equator to land at the poles. Not as much craters or water at the North Pole as there is on the South Pole. And there we go. We've named some of the objects on there. Magnus is obviously big crater at 140 miles, and so on and so forth. Real names to real people. Faraday is there, famous for his electronics. Some of these people I have no clue who they are. Stoeffler, no, don't know who that is. Fernelius, Walter, but we have named new craters after some of the smaller craters that doesn't have names after some of the Apollo astronauts and some of our fallen shuttle astronauts on there. So there we have, I'll give you a little taste of the moon, making it personally your own moon. I have an app. Of course, there's an app for that. I have an app that is called Moon Phases. Let me see if I can boot that up real quick here. Moon Phases shows me tonight what the moon looks like. And it's got names on it, which is good. And I can go ahead of time and see that first quarter moon is going to be at about 2 a.m. on Thursday, and the moon is 251,872 miles away on Thursday, in case you're interested. And that 250,000 miles is about the average. And I can even see that the moon, full moon, is going to be on Friday, March 18th, and it's going to rise at 8:09 p.m. March 18th. And guess where I might be, Marty? That's a good one to go watch on the ocean and watch it come off the ocean. So there's an app for that to tell you when to look at the moon rise and where it's going to be in the sky. So all kinds of ways that you can make your mark on the moon. Marty, we got any of our friends on YouTube, Twitch, Spotify, or Facebook Live sharing with us? He's going to give me a little shout out there to
Dave Stange is in Hawaii.
Dave Stange is in Hawaii. Hi, Dave. Learn how to pronounce your name, as well as Larry Pushker, your buddy from Michigan. And Dave Stange is in Hawaii. He had a beautiful picture that I'll try to share, Dave, of you get up early enough, the brightest stars, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter are near Venus. 3 planets. Those planets were all in our evening sky in the fall and winter, but now they've segued to the morning sky. They haven't moved. The Earth has moved in its orbit around the sun. So instead of, if you like NASCAR racing or sports car racing, think about the Earth in the fall was looking at turn 4, and now we're looking at turn 1, so to speak, as we go around the racetrack of our orbit. We've got Christopher Mick watching in Wisconsin. Esau Nav, we appreciate you watching. My buddy Cliff Watson, how's everything in Australia, buddy? He's down there in Panoma, Australia. Melissa Pope, you better be working hard watching me there at the Space Coast Office of Tourism. Hope you've got the whole gang helping us stay curious. Ophelia Sauterol, she's always watching from Normandy, France. Pam Shivik, I know Pam is digging this moon, getting some moonshine there, Pam, because she is involved with the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers in their youth division. And so glad that you're helping us, Pam, by watch and stay curious. Humberto Lopez is in Colombia. All right. Now, and of course, Tom Usiak's watching, and Mark Usiak, our launch photographer brothers. Hope Carlton Bailey's feeling better out there. Humberto is watching Colombia, and I mentioned Cliff Watson is watching from Australia. And yes, the moon is flipped upside down, down under, to where the southern hemisphere, what we call here the heavily cratered area, would be upside down there. So
You missed Robert Law.
I missed Robert Law, saving the best for last, enjoying his cocktail in Dundee, Scotland. And I hope that you can hope you got a beautiful moon up there to look at. He's looking at the moon right now, Marty, at 8 or 9 o'clock at night in Europe there. So
You got a couple of guests.
we have some guests here that I haven't met them because they were doing a tour here. But I understand you gentlemen worked out at Pad 36, and hopefully we can get them on here to stay curious. Am I right?
Did you work past 36? Pardon?
Did you guys launch rockets at the Rocket Ranch, I understand?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
Somebody else.
no, we just got here.
Well, we're glad to see all of our, we've had a big group of kids here today.
Ocala, he's from.
All right.
Exxon, Ohio.
Actually, I'm from Findlay, Ohio, as everybody knows. So,
Oh, good. He's
Yeah.
from Ashland.
Ashland,
We were all born in Akron.
Akron. I know Akron, Canton, Mogador,
Yeah,
Uniontown.
it's still there.
That's yeah, I know it's still there. Yeah, we could talk about the Barbertons, where I had my first legal drink at the Interlude. And we digress, having fun here on Stay Curious with our wonderful guests here. But we love personalizing our video podcasts. And tell your friends to like us on the American Space Museum on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or Spotify. It means a lot to us, and we hope that you're enjoying our content here.
Do you mind if we put you on camera for a minute?
Oh,
Do you mind if we put
yeah,
you
go
on
ahead.
camera?
Yeah, go ahead. Here, a couple Buckeyes. He's going to swing around the camera here. We've had a good group of people in here in our conference. Wave, guys, there. Good to see you guys. All right, appreciate it. What'd you think of our museum?
Very good.
Very good.
Cool. Saw a lot of one-of-a-kind things here for sure.
That's for sure.
All right. Well, I want you all to think about personalizing the moon this week as you're out there getting some moonshine. Don't drink moonshine. Just absorb it with your eyes, okay? Because write a poem. How about a short story? Take your own photo of it. Get something in the foreground, trees or a building, or go to a cemetery is a fun place to traipse around in under the moonlight. But over 150 songs have been written about the moon, and I've done a column on space for 20-some years I did, and I always enjoyed writing a column about the moon songs from Moon River to Fly Me to the Moon, Moon Dance, Picasso Moon, one of my favorite ones from the Grateful Dead, and Moon Shadow, of course, one of the most famous songs by Van Morrison. But I've got for you, I want to end our little Stay Curious program here with a poem written 144 years ago by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Now, everybody my age has heard of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Marty, I'm not so sure about anybody under 40 years old knowing who Longfellow was. But this is a very beautiful poem. It's called Moonlight. 1878, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote this poem. And I want you to hear the words as he describes moonlight wherever he's living right now. Clear my throat. Moonlight by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. As a pale phantom with a lamp ascends some ruin's haunted stair, so glides the moon along the damp, mysterious chambers of the air. Now hidden in a cloud and now revealed, as if this phantom, full of pain, were by the crumbling walls concealed and at the windows seen again. Until at last, serene and proud, in all the splendor of her light, she walks the terraces of cloud, supreme as an empress of the night. I look but recognize no more objects familiar to my view. The very pathway to my door is an enchanted avenue. All things are changed, one mass of shade. The elm trees drop their curtains down. By palace, park, and colonnade, as I walk as in a foreign town. The very ground beneath my feet is clothed in a diviner air. White marble paves the silent street and glimmers in the empty square. Illusion! Underneath there lies the common life of every day. Only the spirit glorifies with its own tints of sober gray. In vain we look, in vain uplift our eyes to heaven if we are blind. We see but what we have the gift of seeing. What we bring, we find. And there's Moonlight by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. So,
First song played on the moon.
Marty's going to ask me a question here as I'm about to end. Yes, the first song played on the moon. Not sure about that, but somebody's going to tell us.
I'll tell you.
Oh, okay. Marty's going to tell us.
Fly Me to the Moon by Frank Sinatra.
Well, I would imagine that, but which mission?
Apollo 11.
Apollo 11? Okay. Okay. They did take tape recorders with them of moon. I will say that one that was the Air Force song was played by Al Warden on the command module orbiting as Apollo 15 lifted off. On there. But yeah, Fly Me to the Moon, Frank Sinatra. I can click my fingers, but I'm not going to sing that to you. Marty, you want to sing Fly Me to the Moon as we go out? No? Okay. Well, we had some Longfellow, we've had some Sinatra, and so I could crank up the Picasso Moon for you here and have a little Grateful Dead. But we're so glad everybody's enjoyed our Stay Curious program and hope you're enjoying staying star curious on Mondays from your own backyard with me, Stargazer Mark. We will see you again tomorrow to do some space history, catch up on an astronaut birthday or two, all to bridge the space between us.